The Game Boy Advance was the first game console I could ever call mine, and it had a fantastic library of exclusives that feel timeless to play. I spent countless hours exploring Hoenn and Pokemon Emerald, watching those terrible GBA video carts and long car rides with no audio. Surely most of the over 1,500 games available for the console were nothing short of classics and hidden gems, right? No, not even remotely. Most of those games were actually terrible. Usually of the quick cash grab, or you're getting 2 copies of The Incredibles and you're going to like it variety. The Game Boy Advance had a ridiculous amount of garbage, just a bunch of what the hell ever put inside of a cart and sold to you at prices that feel like highway robbery. And I found the 10 absolute worst of the worst. The very bottom of the barrel, guaranteed to ruin a child's birthday and make you rue the day you ever picked up a Game Boy Advance. These are the worst Game Boy Advance games of all time, and I'll be ranking them on a tier list at the end. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. Mortal Kombat is one of the most widespread, accessible, and popular fighting game series of all time. So what the hell happened here with the reviews of this one? The series is so big that Midway just had to put it on everything and anything, leading to a whole lot of portable versions that most would call cruel and unusual. Mortal Kombat on the original Game Boy? Whatever, man. I gave up years ago. But what makes Advance so infamous, so loathed and reviled? It's not just one thing messed up, it's everything. Everything you could possibly mess up with a port of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 is what's wrong with Advance. Missing characters? It's basically tradition to not have full rosters on ports of these games, so whatever. Chewed up and spat out graphics? About what I expect from the GBA. Every single male character with the exception of Liu Kang and the robots having Shiva's voice? Yeah, that makes sense. Wait, what? I'm not kidding. Shiva isn't even in this game, but her voice is used for most of the cast. How did this happen? Were they out of space and just panicked? As if Noob Saibot isn't scary enough on his own, now he sounds like he's passing a kidney stone. But the upside is that the audio is crystal clear, like damn near 1-to-1 with the arcades, which is really impressive. But I'd rather have a functioning combat system than amazing audio, and yet this game insists on having the opposite. It's easier to explain what isn't broken versus what is broken, but I can't even do that because nothing was left unscathed. Every aspect of movement and combos were butchered to fit on this cart. Mortal Kombat is a 6-button game, needed for high and low punches and kicks, its signature block button, you know the works. But the GBA obviously has a much more limited control scheme, so they just lobotomized everyone's movements and made them feel like half the fighters they're supposed to be, which effectively annihilated specific characters from ever being useful. Not that the controls and moves we have left over work, mind you. I don't even know how to begin describing how this game feels to play other than using the words sticky, broken, and luck-based. Will Smoke do the move I'm telling him to do? I don't know. He doesn't know either. So half the roster is so bad they're basically unplayable. Great. But you can go ahead and just slash everyone off because the AI is an out-of-control, mean, vicious joke on you, the player. Mortal Kombat AI has always been cheap, right? Reading your movements to counter you and whatnot. This makes them tough, but incredibly predictable, leaving you ample time to exploit their recoveries. Shao Kahn, the final boss in most of these games, will outright break his own strings to give you an opening to attack. In Mortal Kombat Advance, I'm convinced there is no recovery for any character whatsoever. Like, why is this beginner's mode, second round on the tower Sub-Zero playing like I'm holding his family hostage? Look at how fast he is. How effortlessly he can destroy me. It might not seem that absurd from the footage, but having to play against this is like trying to thread a housefly through the eye of a needle. This isn't just me complaining because I'm not performing very well. Everyone who has played this game can attest that the AI is fundamentally unfair and completely broken, making the arcade towers damn near impossible to beat without cheesing them. But at least you can cheese them. Sometimes the AI just breaks entirely, netting you an unsteady and careful win because it decided to do nothing but block for a reason not even Shang Tsung can figure out. Why the hell do the fighters start so damn far apart from each other? That might not seem like a big issue, but look at how every other game does it. You're a reasonable distance from each other that can lead to being zoned or being rushed down with enough time to react, but Advance's insistence of putting a country mile between everyone means that zoning is absolutely king in this game. So picking a character like Jade and spamming projectiles will net you a slow, boring win, but a win nonetheless. So your only options are praying that the AI doesn't fold you like an omelet, or spamming projectiles and being as cheap as possible to win, with nothing in between. Each character has their 2 fatalities, but no animalities, babalities, brutalities, but they did keep their friendship of all things. Well, that's just the towers mode. What about the other modes? We have 1-on-1 versus, or 2-on-2 versus, that's it. No training mode, no bonuses, nothing at all. I don't even want to imagine what a versus mode through the link cable would look like, but how is someone supposed to improve if they get filtered by Scorpion, level 1 of each tower, who is actually supposed to be Ermac based on the picture? It's not like winning these towers means much, we just get some scrolling text meant to imply a character ending. You're not going to win against Shao Kahn anyways, look at this pandemonium. What a mess, folks. And you know what really flicks me in the nuts? Just a year later, we got a GBA port of another Mortal Kombat game, Deadly Alliance, that, my goodness, actually functions and is kind of fun. Granted, they had to split it into 2 games, but look at the bevy of extras. Functional 3D on the GBA, multiple character stances, and it works. The game can be played as intended. What an improvement. Hardly the definitive edition of Deadly Alliance, but I can at least see someone spending an entire afternoon playing this without wanting to throw themselves off a bridge. And I don't want to hear any of that, well, what did you expect from a GBA game nonsense for this one. There's Street Fighter Alpha 3, Tekken Advance, and other Mortal Kombat games that made the compromise while still being enjoyable to play. It means that Mortal Kombat Advance just did not care about functioning whatsoever. Thanks a lot, Virtue Craft. I'm pretty sure Midway released a version of Ultimate 3 on the DS as an apology for the GBA version that's damn near arcade perfect with combos on the other screen, which looks like a much better time to play. Advance has gained a sort of endearing reputation amongst fans, even being included in the new Legacy collection that was released in 2025. I'd love to see a character tier list of this game. These two? This is personal. Crash Bandicoot and Spyro the Dragon, a legendary platformer series by industry darlings Naughty Dog and Insomniac respectively. Some of the most beloved PlayStation games to this day for their tight controls and tough but fair challenges. These 2 franchises were on the top of the world in the 90s, and they fostered a friendly rivalry between each other, sometimes appearing in each other's games as Easter eggs or even playable characters. As a kid, I wanted nothing more than these 2 to have a grand adventure together, to somehow blend Crash's box breaking and Spyro's flight for some kind of ultimate crossover adventure. But little did I know, that wish curled the monkey's paw. Naughty Dog and Insomniac had long since left both franchises at the hands of other companies, Vicarious Visions and Digital Eclipse, who were doing alright for themselves with GBA games like Crash the Huge Adventure and Spyro's Seasons of Fire and Ice, which adapted the classic formulas quite well for the GBA while still feeling distinct. Vivendi Universal Games, who owned both brands, decided to run an experiment. What if we made an official Crash Spyro crossover game? No, games. 2 versions, each one named after the other's color. Or just Fusion if you're British. Sell them both independently or in a power pack together to maximize profits. So you're getting 2 games in 1 for this review. Aren't you lucky? Vicarious Visions was in charge of developing both of these titles, but their inclusion on this video can only spell heartbreak and severe trust issues, so don't get too excited. Let's start with Crash Purple. The story goes as follows. Cortex and Ripto link up and disguise their minions as Crash and Spyro. Crash and Spyro have to stop them. We start off with Crash in the Wumpa Islands or whatever, and we run into our first and most glaring issue. This is not a Crash Bandicoot game. But whatever do I mean? There's Crash right there. He spins, jumps, dies horribly. How can this not be a Crash game? Don't be fooled. There are no platforming levels to be found in these hub worlds. Instead, there are individual platforms that lead to minigames, not levels. mini-games. Such classics as Murder Baby Sheep with a Rocket Launcher, The Black Ones Run Faster, or Flappy Bird, or Tanks, or auto-scrolling levels. Are any of these fun, enjoyable, decent time wasters, or even tolerable? Not at all. Think of the most boring, simple, and uninspired way to play anything of what you're seeing on screen, and Crash Purple says, "Hold my Wumpa fruit," and puts you through it. Each hub has 5 minigames, some extra minigames that boil down to rapidly pressing the A button and a boss fight, which is usually just a harder variation of a minigame you've already played. Need I go on? Oh, but I will. I'm not done with you two yet. What about the rock-solid Crash formula that was already established that was just thrown out the window for bland, repetitive garbage? Huge Adventure and Entranced were really solid titles. Why did Vivendi insist on not using a successful game formula, or try to experiment by incorporating more elements from Spyro's games? Once you've played each minigame once, you'll very quickly notice that they're all repeated throughout each world, with basically no variations apart from each other other than being slightly harder, with slightly being an overly generous descriptive term that feels wrong to use. If I had to choose a best minigame, it's probably the sheep blasting, because at least it's mercifully short. The raft and helicopter levels come right from hell though. Controls like ass, your timing is oddly strict, and there's no sense of reward upon receiving a crystal. You just think, thank God it's over. But where's the crossover aspect? Our first boss is actually Spyro. These two characters finally get to meet head on, and the visit is commemorated by throwing Molotov cocktails at each other. Look at Spyro fall. There's no way he's surviving that, right? I don't even remember why they were fighting in the first place, but I'll be damned if it isn't a really funny visual. Once the Spyro fight is over, the two sides link up, which means that Spyro appears in cutscenes and there's no opportunity to play as him at all. Coco and the Professor are together in cutscenes, sometimes, and we can run into classic Spyro characters in the hub worlds, who state the blatantly obvious and do jack, aside from standing still and not contributing to the massive problem that both of us are currently facing. Thanks a lot, Dick. Moneybags even shows up, and you can even trade Wumpa fruits for these collectible cards, some of which can be found in the overworld and do nothing. They don't count for a completion rate whatsoever. They just sit there in your collection to look pretty and appreciate in value, I guess. Actually, that's quite accurate to current trading card culture. This game lasts an hour 30, which is abysmal, even for a Crash Bandicoot game. And an hour of that is spent on the same 5 to 6 mini-games. The remaining 30 is spent figuring out where these damn platforms are to play the mini-games. The hub worlds are designed in a way where reaching the platforms requires backtracking and avoiding enemies and traps, which I'll never understand. Why would you want to die on your way to play the game? The second to last boss is Ripto, and of course, it's just a minigame reskin. The final world is locked until you collect all the gems rather than crystals, which can be unlocked by breaking all the boxes in each minigame, and yeah, I'm not doing that. Bite me, Crash. I had the misfortune of playing this years ago via emulation. It was terrible then, and I think I hate it even more now. I know a lot of people remember Crash Purple fondly, but I'm telling you, this game isn't worth the plastic it's printed on, and Child U was stupid. The absolute best thing I can say about this game is that the controls function. Crash goes where you tell him to and jumps responsively, that's it. The music isn't good, the minigames certainly aren't. There's nothing timeless or even fun about this release, just a colossal waste of money and time. And you know what scares me? Crash Purple is said to be better than Spyro Orange. I'm genuinely terrified. What did they do to poor Spyro in this game? I'll tell you what they did. They made it even worse. How? Well, Vicarious Visions already had a great foundation for Crash's movement, but Spyro's GBA games were handled by another company, who translated the 3D levels into isometric ones, which weren't without their growing pains, but did an admirable enough job. Now Spyro is in 2D and has so little of his signature moveset that he shares more traits with me than himself. He can jump once and spit out his mud jug in a pathetic attempt to imitate his proper flame breath. I think you unlock some more movement options later on, but it's not like you'll need them for anything more than attempting, yes, attempting, to navigate the overworlds. Spyro is such a tubby little dragon that he can barely strut across these measly gaps and flies 100 feet back when struck. The minigames have even less to do with Spyro than Crash's, because the ones that aren't just copy-pasted are all tedious, exhausting vehicle segments that leave you plenty of time to admire the scenery. There is a shmup game, but you shoot so fast that nothing could ever be a threat to you. Come on! At least the Crash Spyro boss fight makes way more sense from his perspective. Crash is horrifying and an active threat to any team's competency. The entire experience feels like it was given half the production value of Purple, and it really shows. But what about the GBA connectivity? You barely get any multiplayer games. Which begs the question, why were there 2 versions? Just make one good game! I can't believe these were released. What a gut-wrenching disappointment. Please do not play either of these. Crash and Spyro have way better games than the GBA, and if you're so desperate to play mini-games on the GBA, Mario Party is right there, and Mario Party Advance isn't even good. Seems like the Spyro Crash link-up is never fated to happen, even in modern times, which is a damn shame. The GBA has a lot of FPS games for some reason. You've got acceptable ports of Wolfenstein 3D and Doom 1 and 2, a few Doom clones like Dark Arena, even a Serious Sam game on there. Dark Arena performs really well, outperforming Doom itself, funnily enough. But what's the worst possible FPS game on the console? It's Medal of Honor Underground. I'm a bit of an FPS unk, so I hold the PS2 era Medal of Honor games in quite high regard. Underground was originally released in the year 2000 for the PlayStation 1, and from what I can tell, it looks like one of the console's best shooters. But a couple years later, Rebellion Developments ported to the Game Boy Advance, a very curious studio and choice of console. Rebellion are the masterminds behind the massive Sniper Elite and Zombie Army series, so it can't be that bad, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and issue an honest-to-God epilepsy and motion sickness warning for this one. Not joking whatsoever. Please watch this segment with caution. Good lord. Good lord! I can't believe what I'm seeing. What is this? I don't know, but it hurts. It hurts real bad. I don't even know how to begin describing this. It's like if Doom was a Salvador Dali painting. It's like Cruelty Squad ran through the mud while running at 4 frames a second. There's no frames happening. Can you call this a frame? This looks like a Vectrex game. I can't tell what anything is aside from my pistol. Are these supposed to be enemy Nazis? I think so, but they don't even look human. There was barely an attempt at replicating the human form. Was that intentional? Your gun's crosshair locks on to anything in front of them, while your only options are to shoot with A, swap weapons with B, strafe with L and R, and select to manually reload. If you have any cover whatsoever, you win every encounter. This might as well be a turn-based battle system for how methodical and calculated it is. None of the strategy or intensity required to play an FPS game is needed. Even the start menu feels broken. Look at this, tell me what is highlighted here. It should be no, right? In blue? For some reason the game uses white to highlight menu options. White? Does that not go against everyone's natural instincts? I accidentally quit the mission the first time around because it was such a confusing design choice. Any movement causes this ungodly, disgusting texture warping effect to occur that makes my eyes water and my stomach flip inside out. Can you even tell what this is? It's a compass, but you can't even make out the initial letters because the cardinal directions are so warped. Level 1 genuinely almost made me puke out my lunch on my keyboard. I'm not exaggerating for dramatic effect. Are we seeing the same game? To add insult to injury, the first level is an escort mission too. You have to staple yourself to your dumbass brother who got himself captured and let him find the exit. But don't walk too far or he gets scared and stops and lets himself get shot at. There's no time for anxiety attacks, son. This is World War II, let's get 'em moving. They knew no one could tell what was happening on screen, so they just spelled everything out for you. Listen to the music. No, really, just listen. Does this not sound like the dying squeals of a pig bit crunched onto a cartridge? There is a story, but come on, son. For one, I'm not reading all that. 2, I can't read all that. Look how garbled the text is. I was floating around the idea that the game is a lot harder to play with a blown up resolution, so I planned to test it on original hardware by physically buying the cart. But getting anything shipped from the States is kind of a nightmare financially, so I compromised, and wanted to put a ROM of the game on my modified 3DS console. And then I remembered that since Nintendo's hardware is garbage, the screws on the back of my 3DS are stripped, and yanking them out would mean they would never go back in. So I threw my hands up and just shrunk the emulator's window. Because that's all this game deserves, to be manhandled and treated like the piece of garbage that it is. I had to give up on level 2. Level 2! This game has made me more ill than any VR game I've ever played before. At least I understand why a VR game would trigger someone's motion sickness. There should be no reason the game does that, nor why it looks like this. None of the GBA's FPS games look amazing, but none of them made me regret eating prior. The final insult, the most disgusting, brutal, and downright Machiavellian joke of them all is that this game is entirely password-based. But for a game this illegible and scrambled to use passwords, it really does feel like a taunt. I can barely read this on a computer monitor. Imagine being a child in a car and being given a password to write down while playing this. Not only does this deserve its reputation as one of the console's worst games, it might be one of the worst video games of all time. Period. How many other games regularly cause physical illness because of how disgusting it looks? Play any other FPS game on the console, any other game, go outside. Porn is healthier than this! I don't even want to know how multiplayer in this game works. They knew they messed up because the series got another entry on the GBA, but they changed genres entirely, now sporting a very pleasant art style for a top-down strategy game. This game should be in the same league as Scary Maze Game, as something you dare your friends to play to see their reactions. There's no way this didn't cause at least one seizure, right? I'm not even gonna pretend there's a possibility of this being good. Do you really have confidence in an E.T. video game? As if the original Atari version isn't one of the most infamous games to ever exist already? New Kid Co. decided to make an E.T. game. Sorry, they made 7 E.T. games. Why? Who the hell wants E.T. that bad? I guess to coincide with the film's 20th anniversary, there were a ton of games created in the early 2000s, including a game where you control E.T. as a virtual pet on the Game Boy Color. Right. E.T. really isn't all that in a bag of chips to begin with. It's been ages since I've seen it, but under no circumstances do I want to ever again, and playing this game certainly didn't help. Oh no, the controls. What happened? So all the previous games had control schemes that made sense, or at least theoretically functioned how you'd expect them to. E.T. decided to not do that and dare to be terrible in a unique way. He controls like a racing cart. He builds momentum the more he can walk unimpeded, which means navigating tight corners in this forest is basically impossible without bumping into everything, like trees and gigantic bugs and frogs, which are enemies. But they don't seem to do damage? I got hit like 30 times and nothing happened. Something did happen. E.T. moans really loudly. E.T. for some reason has no invincibility frames, but the enemies do, meaning you can be bounced from hit to hit like a badminton shuttlecock. Why did they deliberately program momentum and traction in an isometric game that's mostly a collectathon? You'll overshoot or undershoot everything you're trying to grab. It's a mess. If you tap, yes, tap, not hold, the A button, E.T. raises the roof and runs twice as fast, which means you'll careen into a wall instantly or meet whatever you're trying to avoid head on. The B button activates his magical flip the bird that does nothing so far. What a moveset. Couldn't we get a mini-map or something? I'm so lost. Your objective changes per mission, loosely following the narrative of the film. Our first mission is to roam around the forest and collect a dozen or so flowers, and then the ship abandons us. The second mission, the CIA or whoever is trying to capture E.T., and if they grab you... Oh, what are they doing? Are you seeing this? I don't remember that in the movie. That must have been quite the car conversation between parent and child. Mommy, I don't remember that part in the movie where E.T. gets raped! I know it's crude, but look at that. What else am I supposed to interpret from this? Are they just grabbing his head really hard? They're using him for unwilling sexual favors, and I'm disgusted. I completely understand why his run animation looks like this now, because I think I'd be making that exact face. E.T. go to confessional. Ouch. Just like E.T., this mission sucks a fat one. You have to navigate the same forest we just played while avoiding all of these rapacious agents. We get what I assume are Reese's Pieces to restore health, but one time I kind of just died on the spot despite not being touched, and I can't explain it for the life of me. Getting to Elliot's house allows us to go on another treasure hunt to try and build the phone to phone home, where we get to play as Elliot and E.T. at the same time. Elliot controls the same, but has a limited amount of baseballs he can use to nail the giant bugs and police officers roaming through his house. The police, I understand, but why does Elliot have a frog infestation in his house? Couldn't we get more creative indoor enemies like dust bunnies or rats? Anything that aren't the same frogs from the forest? How did they all get inside his house to begin with? We need to find 16 parts across the property. They're just red spheres labeled P for parts. How creative. They can be found in plain sight, or they need to be dislodged from a baseball, or using E.T.'s magical finger to lift objects for incredibly basic, but still functional puzzles. Of course, E.T.'s pathfinding is broken beyond belief. He gets lost if you aren't attached to his hip and stuck on every corner. It's such a pain to wiggle him around to get him to follow you again. But at least there's no specific punishment for abandoning him somewhere, so you're free to wander on your own before you need him. This is the basic crux of the game. Either you need to collect stuff or run away from something, and it's really the biggest crime is that it's boring. A lot of these past games have been downright broken or completely creatively bankrupt. This one, I'm happy to report, is just mid. The game works, it mostly makes sense, it's just a very middling, unimpressive children's game that I can't recommend, because there are way better, more entertaining licensed games on the console, none of which are the E.T. variety, thankfully. But you can also recommend a lot worse. Oh, you want to talk about bad licensed kids games? For as good as the Shrek films are, for some reason a great Shrek game has yet to appear. They range from they were okay to Shrek on the Xbox, Shrekbox if you will. Platformers, adventure games, party games, Roblox. Nothing seemed to do the layered franchise justice. If you're truly stumped on how to make a licensed kids game, just make a kart racer, and I'm actually delighted to say that Shrek actually has a pretty alright racing game. Shrek Smash and Crash. It's kind of rough around the edges, but it was a pretty fun time to mess around with on the PS2 back in the day. But it was far from the first Shrek racing game out there. That honor belongs to Shrek Swapkart Speedway. Not a name that brings a lot of joy. A swamp is what you bury a body in, not race on. What am I going to be doing laps as Pee-wee Gaskin? First impressions are not strong. The song sounds like it's trying to be a so quirky, so random song from Earthbound or a WarioWare game or something, but with no understanding of chord progression or the instruments being played. I can't tell what any of these sounds come from. It all registers as imaginary Dr. Seuss instruments. The game itself isn't much better. Look at our roster, dog. Where the hell is Donkey? Farquaad? Most of the game's recognizable cast is just not there from the get-go. Bro, who is this? Whatever, we got our standard handling, which is drifting, speed, and recovery stats, and a surprisingly large amount of courses to pick, even if they all end up looking the same. But much better kart racers on the same console have the exact same problem, so I won't blame Shrek for that one. What is a Shrek problem is the performance here. Good grief. It doesn't matter how many racers are on screen, you're never rising above single-digit FPS. The entire game chugs worse than a coal engine. Combine that with every single course looking wet and disfigured, and you have the perfect recipe for a disorienting, ugly racer. I don't remember where I saw it, but in a review for this game, someone called it expressionist, and I can't agree more. Even worse than that are its controls. This might be the heaviest, most inflexible kart racer I've ever controlled. It feels like you're trying to snap a tree over your knee. Drifting is so rough and heavy, even when I choose a character supposedly proficient in it. But the good news is that you do not need to drift whatsoever. Not even once for the entire duration of the game. I was barely paying attention, but by just remaining on track and driving, I was able to outpace every other computer-controlled player by an entire lap. This wasn't just a fluke on the easiest map in the game. I was consistently able to smoke every single racer without breaking a sweat. Look at how far ahead I am. I even changed my difficulty to the highest possible setting, and nope, All it does is increase the speed. The AI couldn't touch me whatsoever. The game is fundamentally broken, brothers and sisters. Why bother choosing characters based on stats? Why bother touching any of the generic cookie-cutter power-ups? I couldn't even get footage of it to show you how dookie they are. Compare this to the console's best racing game. Once again, bringing up Crash Bandicoot to showcase Nitro Kart's GBA port. Notice the stable performance, recognizable characters, challenging AI, useful items, and extremely fun drifting mechanics. This is a game where you actually have to pay attention to win and still holds up to this day, despite only being released in 2003. 1 year after Shrek's Swapkart. Shrek's got no excuse. This is a piss-poor kart racer best left far, far away. Also, if you exit this screen at any point, you'll lose all your progress on the pre. You aren't told that. You can't select other levels unless they are unlocked linearly in the pre every single time. I hope you like the first couple courses because that's all you're gonna end up playing. I'm getting real tired of these baby games. All this licensed slop for kiddie winks. Shrek, E.T., World War II, baby stuff.
I need a man's game.
Dragon Ball, one of the biggest media entertainment franchises ever created. That I know nothing about. Never saw it growing up. I preferred Bleach, so if I get Dragon Ball lore wrong, I don't care. Webfoot, the team behind the Legacy of Goku games, was tasked to create this handheld fighter by Atari. Oh no. So not only is this considered one of the worst GBA games of all time, it's considered the worst Dragon Ball game of all time. And it was published by Atari. Hold on to something, because we're not in for a good time. When you see that Atari logo, you know you're in for some cheaply produced cash grab. This isn't Webfoot's first game. They were actually somewhere in the process of creating a fully 3D Dragon Ball game for the PS2 that never panned out. So since they had a ton of 3D models lying around, they just crunched them down to fit. And you can really tell. There's a serious Uncanny Valley vibe with all these guys and gals. Proportions are weird, facial expressions are a complete joke, they're animated somehow too stiffly but also too smoothly. There's nothing appealing about the game's visuals, not in the backgrounds and certainly not in the generic UI. Look at what they did to Vegeta. He looks like he's doing his best to try and spy crab walk. Some characters are kind of on model, the rest, sleep paralysis demons. Unlike MK Advance, Taiketsu was built from the ground up as a GBA fighter, so characters' movesets reflect the 4 available buttons. And herein lies the game's core gimmick. Holding L and R will charge everyone's ki to 3 levels, which acts as your meter to pull off special attacks and brief transformations depending on the character. That's actually a pretty fun idea. It just doesn't stick the landing because the divide between standard attacks and special attacks is as vast as it is cheap. Regular punches and kicks do dick all damage, but supers can easily wipe out a third of your health. So every match becomes a game of keep away while you focus on charging your ki. That might not sound too terrible, but these meters are extremely limited and vanish without use. So what should be a match of brains and brawn turn into a game of ambling towards each other, doing no damage, and then stomping on people with a monkey leg that will actually deal damage. Oh, also, everyone has the exact same moveset. I don't mean that they all have similar moves, they have the same moves. Only their specials are different. So the meta of this game is choosing the best character out of the 7 available options? 7? That's nothing. Mortal Kombat 1 had 6 characters on the original Game Boy in 1993. 7 characters is inexcusable, and everyone is the same character! What are we doing here? Of course the AI isn't fun to fight against, why do you ask? Not because it's cheap, but because it's so slow. They never want to use their key moves, which means that I frequently ran out on the timer, which means that whatever fighter has the most amount of health automatically wins the fight. So you can very easily just chip damage Broly at the end to win via technicality. That sounds like Vegeta, right? Doing nothing but cheap shots and winning by TKO? There is this sky battle mechanic where the combatants get launched up in the air and slug it out in a kind of QTE that doesn't last too long, but is really funny to look at. A single arcade playthrough took me an agonizing 30 minutes that felt like 100 years and left me feeling none the wiser on character strategy, because there is none. And disappointed that all we got was a single scrolling image and a paragraph for Vegeta's character ending. Well, actually, we unlocked Raditz as a new fighter, and we got a ton of points we can spend in a shop for extra battle themes, character bios, a ton of bonus features were crammed in here, and a lot of extra fighters are unlockable, but it requires so much grinding in these arcade towers with the same fights and the same boring, bland combat done ad nauseum. It's a shame because there were kernels of love for the franchise dotted throughout by a team that clearly cared about it, but those kernels just so happened to be surrounded by turd. Had this game been able to give each character a unique moveset, tweak the key system a little bit to not just stop fights in their tracks, and perhaps not look like this, I can see a very small but dedicated fan following for this game that acknowledges that it sucks, but it sucks in a way they can appreciate and remember fondly. There's nothing worth remembering about Taiketsu. Except for the spindly-legged Vegeta, that's pretty funny. Unlike Dragon Ball, I'm actually quite familiar with Yu Hakusho. It was one of the first things I watched while I was experimenting with the medium as a teenager, and I still regard the series with some real gratitude. So many iconic scenes and moments. It probably has the most iconic tournament arc in anime, and Atari published New Things Were Too Good to Be True. You know this game is going to be Kino when its main menu options are play the game, remove the music and sound effects, and nothing else. Not even gonna bother making fun of how this game looks because it's quite obvious from just looking at it. I don't care that Yusuke's outfit is Chernobyl green or that Kuwabara looks like a Simpsons character, but I just don't get why none of the guys making these games ever just stick to sprite work instead of horrific looking 3D models. I have no doubt in my mind that a lot of these titles were rushed due to publisher nonsense, so I can definitely sympathize with having to release the game in a functioning state just to get it out. But basically any GBA game that's remembered at all has an incredibly distinct art style, almost entirely based around sprites. And the ones that aren't very graphically focused games to begin with, like puzzle games. Wouldn't it look so much cooler to attempt to capture that classic 90s anime style with sprite portraits and not whatever this is? Yu Hakusho, Ghost Detective, Spirit Files, what a mouthful, adapts the anime's first major arc, following Yusuke Urameshi's death and eventual job as a spirit detective solving cases by beating the snot out of everything he sees. Everything that happened before the Dark Tournament. So all the stuff everyone forgets about the series. Yusuke getting hit by the car, Kuwabara at his funeral, and then the tournament arc is how a lot of people remember the anime. And the game punishes you by forcing you to engage with all the stuff in between in the most aggravating, strenuous way electronically possible. The vast majority of this game takes place in whatever city Yu Hakusho takes place in, and does its absolute best to make use of it by adding several missions to follow the anime's plot beats, but with all context removed and presented in a way where events simply do not connect. What I mean by this is that when we're given our ability to first play the game, we're given the objective to pick a fight, before we have to defend ourselves from random school children attempting to necklace us. Then go wipe the floor with Kuwabara. Then our objective becomes find the little boy, a boy we are not shown or hinted towards in any regard whatsoever, meaning you have to just follow this compass blindly, which is nowhere near as brainless as it sounds because this entire city is laid out in a way that makes running in a straight line impossible. So you have to run all the way around massive roadblocks and detours and parking lots just to reach the sidewalk you need to be at. Now multiply this by nearly 20. And you have an hour of gameplay stretched out to 3.5 hours of running around all gangly and late for something, while getting chased by groups of random civilians like your Ricky Spanish. Yusuke and the other playable characters you eventually unlock, like Kuwabara, Hiei, Kurama, etc., have a basic attack and a magical spirit attack that recharges from meter, but every single enemy is so pathetic that just punching and kicking them is way more fruitful. Look at how my button mashing is just melting this endgame boss. Totally brainless. Oh yeah, and the hit detection is so demanding that you have to be practically touching eyeballs to have any hits connect whatsoever. There's an experience system that drip feeds you additional stat points and you unlock some more spirit attacks at story-specific moments, but there's no point to use them if you can just raw dog them with a bum rush. Especially since every boss fight litters the arena in additional health items. Not once did I ever die, I never even came close. The way the story is presented is the most trite, cheap garbage imaginable. There's no real cutscenes, just a very rare anime frame screen cap and the most basic looking text box overlaid a shot of each location meant to replicate the simple but profound story of Yu Hakusho. And it upsets me, because excellent moments like Yusuke's funeral or meeting Genkai the Gilf are totally butchered because not one person working on this cared enough to write dialogue above a technically acceptable level. So much is skipped over, nothing has any impact, there's no dramatic music whatsoever, no real emotions from the characters. For an anime that had so many great, memorable moments, to be portrayed like this feels like a total betrayal of the source material in the laziest way possible. Like, we couldn't just get anime screenshots and more expressive text boxes and character portraits? You're covering 25 episodes of the anime. How pressed for time could you possibly be? They put more effort into the game's packaging than the game itself. You want to know the real contents of the chapter black tape? It's just a long play of this game. There's this segment during Genkai's training where you have to play these mini games that are somehow dumber than Crash Purple and Spyro Oranges. This is a rock, paper, scissors game where your opponent goes first and you just have to select the appropriate action to gain points, and choosing the wrong one means you lose a hit. Who the f thought that was a good rock, paper, scissors minigame? What boggles my mind is that the developers behind this, Sensory Sweep Studios, made another Yu Hakusho game called Tactic Tournaments that picks up in the Dark Tournament arc. But look, they totally overhauled the presentation, gave it a much more pleasing sprite-based art style, and made a grid-based tactics game. It doesn't look amazing, but clearly the team can put some effort into their games. They just choose to make garbage most of the time. The company's biggest claims to fame are My Japanese Coach on Nintendo DS, Jackass the Video Game on Nintendo DS, and getting arrested for tax fraud and racketeering. Not making that last one up, it's completely true. Apparently the company's founder and primary programmer of this game, Dave Rushton, wasn't abiding by Utah's labor laws by not paying employees properly and got arrested for tax evasion and racketeering, which completely annihilated the company. Look, there's his name in the credits, and there's his mugshot. Honestly, for how bad this game is, and I know my take is controversial, he should have got the death penalty. You know what this game is? A lazy, uninspired, floundering D-average student who does the bare minimum to keep himself above water and not sink, but has no aspirations to achieve anything better than the minimum of not failing. And you just have to tolerate it. Bask in the glow of mediocrity so pungent it actively affects the other students, who care more about the material and want to do more than just not fail. For some reason, I actually beat this game. Maybe I was just coping and hoped it would somehow redeem itself, but no, it did not. I had no idea what a Mucha Lucha was prior to recording, so I decided to watch a couple episodes with my morning coffee, and found it to be a decent enough time for an early 2000s Flash cartoon, but it's certainly no El Tigre. It's not even Sidekick. But I can definitely see why this show has a ton of people nostalgic over it. I now know more about Mucha Lucha than Dragon Ball, so I will not be invited to the carne asada. Adapting a wrestling-themed kids show seems like the easiest layup of all time, no? Just make some simplistic but fun combos, match the show's art style and humor, and you're golden. But no! Digital Eclipse... Wait, Digital Eclipse? I just talked about them. They made the Spyro games. Sometimes these guys can make decent and even good games, but they did not bring their A-team for this one. They didn't bring their B-team. They didn't release the game. It escaped. On pure appearances, it doesn't look that bad. It's clearly cheaply made, but Mucha Lucha's status as an early Flash animated show means capturing its art style isn't exactly a hard thing to do. It's a beat-em-up, which is concerning, because the GBA had more beat-em-ups than there are grains of sand on this planet. Plenty of recognizable franchises like Star Wars and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles had great beat-em-ups that were able to use the limited button setup to create simple but memorable combat that honored the source material and made school bus trips that much more tolerable. But Mucha Lucha doesn't concern itself with things like fun. There's 3 characters, and they all have a light punch attack, heavy kick, jumping attack, and can throw objects. But this game has a fatal design flaw, something that completely and utterly annihilates it. Your light punch attack causes every single enemy to be momentarily stunned from whatever they were doing. completely interrupting their attacks and allowing you to wail on them with no drawbacks whatsoever. Look at this. This is a boss fight, and it can't even move for my basic attack. Have you ever seen a wrestling match where a guy just stood still and did the same punch 20 times and murdered his opponent? Am I playing as a luchador or Sonny Liston? I'm not exaggerating when I say that everyone in this game works like this, which means there is literally no challenge whatsoever. There aren't any combos either, so every fight boils down to punching someone into the corner and just waiting for them to die, because of course, everything takes around 20 hits to die. There are special moves for each character, but they take so long to recharge that you get to use it maybe twice in each level. This game has an absurd way of introducing new enemies. They just add one new one per level. So level 1 of each world has 1 enemy, level 2 has 2, so on and so forth until the boss fight of each level, which are easier than the regular enemies. I can't believe this was released. This is a fundamentally broken combat system that draws out every encounter to an agonizing standstill. It stops being funny after the first level because nothing in this game poses a real threat to you, so you're just mashing buttons to incrementally progress through boring, uninspired levels. The characters have no signature moves from the TV show, but this game has so little athleticism and actual wrestling inspiration that it begs the question why Mucha Lucha was chosen to be adapted. Was the brand really that hot that a GBA game was just so needed by the public? Apparently so, because the series almost got a PS2 game, but it never came to be because no publisher was interested in publishing it. Probably because they saw this piece of garbage and looked elsewhere. Each level has a time limit representing a grade, and the longer you take, the worse your grade is. I put the game down for a moment to use the washroom, so I took a minute and 30 seconds longer than the game wanted, and I got an F, which means I could not progress and had to do the whole level over again. With how easy the game is, you should really not be failing at all, but you're not shown a timer until you beat the level. So if you went exploring for secret areas and took too long, start over from scratch, buddy. The best praise I can give this game is that there's a working save function. That seems small, but consider how many games in this video alone still use a password system because they just couldn't be asked to print cards with a battery in them. So good on you, Mucha Lucha. Crazy how this game has less input lag than the Mega Man Legacy collection that Digital Eclipse made later. Star Wars video games are a spectrum that can range from phenomenal, genre-defining titles loved by all, or ancient artifacts we as a society never should have released. Apprentice of the Force and especially Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith are fantastic titles for the console. Revenge of the Sith is genuinely one of my favorite video games ever for its electrifying and pulse-pounding combat, excellent sprite work, and gorgeous soundtrack. Somewhere in the middle, we get those oft-forgotten GBA ports of the LEGO Star Wars games, and at the bottom we get Star Wars Flight of the Falcon. A Star Wars game focusing on the Millennium Falcon. Not inherently a bad idea. And it starts off with a pretty generic but playable shooter level that goes on for way too long. Everything is way too hard to hit, and all you need to do is blow up one ship at the end and you can just avoid everything at the cost of having low points. Oh no. Weird detour, but have you ever heard of the Great Filter? It's a sort of theory that something is preventing any potential life in the universe from progressing past the point of colonizing space or leaving the planet. We have no idea what it is. It could be that no species has the intelligence to figure it out, or there's some aspect of space that kills anyone from trying it, or it's God, but I figured it out. It's level 2 in Star Wars Flight of the Falcon. Despite the game being named after the Millennium Falcon, the second level has us sitting in Luke's Tatooine sand speeder escaping the Empire. And Lord above, look at what we are seeing! The nauseating 3D is already a problem, but look at how fast we're going in comparison to how much time we have to weave between buildings and to try and shoot stormtroopers. You so much as nudge anything, and you're dead. Look at how narrow everything is. Look at how little time you have to zip past chunks of whatever these are. How am I supposed to shoot anything if I can't process what I'm seeing? I'm embarrassed to say how long this took me to not blow myself up, but when I finally reached the end of the timer, I lost. I thought I was supposed to just survive till the end, but no, this is a time limit. You have to be holding R to go faster. As if the speeder wasn't fast enough, I have to hold R to go even quicker, weave through buildings, and shoot stormtroopers. This game expects the world of you, and you can't even run it past 5 frames a second. Need I really say more? I have limited time on this planet and I'm not wasting a single second more of it playing this trash. I looked at some of the future levels online, and it's the exact same thing, just with different coats of paint. No save system, of course, password only. You'd think the Star Wars brand would promise some sort of quality control or guarantee of enjoyment, but even before Disney did it, this game will teach you otherwise. Finally, we're at the end of the road, and our last stop is an officially licensed game based on the once-hit TV show Fear Factor, where a young Joe Rogan, back when he looked like the captain of a Royal Caribbean cruise ship, got a bunch of college students to face their fears by eating mealworms or jumping off a building or whatever. These outrageous stunts can actually be a really solid excuse for an over-the-top and edgy minigame collection, and the game starts out weirdly strong with creating a whole-ass character with stat distribution. It's incredibly simple, but it does affect the various minigames throughout, and with being able to create multiple characters, I think it's a really neat tactic to stand out and honor the show's contestant-based drama. The main mode is to become a contestant on the show, competing against computer players or your friends in multiplayer. There's a very strange design choice where you're always competing last and are given the opportunity to watch each player attempt the stunt prior, giving you a sort of sneak peek. On one hand, it helps someone new to the game understand what's going on past just the wall of text you're presented telling you how the controls work, but this also means you're watching 5 computer players play the game. You can skip all of these quite quickly, but it does mean you'll be waiting 30 seconds to actually play the game. Each round sees 2 computer players eliminated, so you get about 3 stunts from various categories, like escaping locks, platforming, eating bugs, whatever goes on in Fear Factor. There are a hilarious amount of FMV cutscenes showcasing each stunt, which are really grimy looking, but also incredibly charming. Couldn't spot old Joe Rogan in any of them, but beggars can't be choosers. Each game has a different control scheme, usually involving some level of D-pad precision and action with the A and B buttons. But do you see this meter right here? This is the fear meter, and you must control it by strategically tapping L and R while you're doing each stunt, which is controlled at the same time as doing any action. An experienced player can do both at the same time, but a novice will likely need to pause between actions in order to not tip the cursor too far in either direction, resulting in an instant fail. You have to be careful with each tap because you can wildly overshoot it if not paying attention. It adds a surprising amount of strategy to otherwise very basic but very functional and occasionally fun minigames with a trademark edge factor. The fear factor, if you will. The stunts are the most contentious point of the game. There aren't a ton of them, they can definitely feel repetitive, and I definitely have my favorites amongst them. As long as you understand that you need to be performing the correct actions and not neglecting the fear meter, these aren't too difficult. But difficulty can be tweaked in the options menu. Amongst other options to change how stunts are selected, if you play by elimination, points, or by selecting another character to be voluntold to do a stunt. And there's a practice mode where you can just play the minigames without entering a tournament. Depending how long you take to do a stunt, you're awarded points, which is actually how you progress to the top of the leaderboard. Otherwise, if you're the slowest, you're out. I can't believe I'm saying it, but I was pleasantly surprised with Fear Factor Unleashed. Yeah, the game looks muddy, the controls can feel a little too fickle, and the small amount of stunts available that already feel repetitive ensure this will not be considered one of the console's best anytime soon. But not only does the game completely work as it should, there's real opportunity for fun times to be had. I enjoyed mastering some of these challenges, even if failing most of them results in your character dying. I certainly don't remember that from the TV show. The game could have used more time to bake in the oven, more mini-games, definitely more computer player names because it chose the same 5 every single time and it bothered me. But I can totally see a good game here. I would have liked this one a lot as a kid. I'm shocked to see it rated so low. On the same level as E.T. and Mucha Lucha, you're out to lunch. 10 terrible GBA games. 11 if you count Crash and Spyro as 2 separate games. Some I was pleasantly surprised by, some were about as bad as I was expecting, and some were even worse. I've decided to celebrate this painful endeavor by creating a tier list, and here are the tiers. Not that bad for games that I don't quite think deserve the reputation of the worst of all time. Not good, but playable, which is exactly what it sounds like. Fatally flawed for games with serious issues with them that makes them a tough recommendation. Awful for games with issues so glaring you could seriously consider avoiding at all costs. Borderline unplayable for games so bad you can either barely or cannot play them even if you tried. And Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 2, which goes as follows: "And the Lord thy God shall deliver them before thee. Thou shalt smite them, and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor shew mercy unto them." Which is to say that playing these are actively harmful to one's physical, mental, and spiritual health. Let's go bottom to top. Fear factor is in the not that bad tier, because I really think it isn't. E.T. settles itself into not good, but playable tier, because its many issues don't destroy the game outright, but don't make it especially enjoyable. Crash Purple begins the fatally flawed tier because of how damn lazy it is, and Shrek's Swapkart settles right above it for its dangerous levels of mediocrity. Spyro Orange was so bad it went a tier above, straight into awful, followed by Yu Hakusho and DBZ Taiketsu, some of the worst anime games you could ever play. Rounding the awful tier list is Mucha Lucha, and now we're down to the final three, the unplayable ones. Mortal Kombat Advance is up next because for how terrible that is, the fact the opponents can be cheesed means that the game is indeed playable, if only technically. Flight of the Falcon doesn't get quite that far and gatekeeps the unplayable tier. And what other game could possibly get the Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 2 tier all to itself other than Medal of Honor Underground, taking its crown as the worst Game Boy Advance game of all time? I looked back at my footage while editing, got sick again, and came to the conclusion that this game is a genuine hazard to people's health, and every single copy and ROM of that game should be taken from consumers and only studied in a sterile lab environment to prevent another game from ever coming close to its atrocious nature. Here's each game in 11-to-1 order. Did you totally disagree with my reviews for a specific game? Did I miss a title on your personal no-go list? Comment below if you have a suggestion for the worst GBA game of all time. This has been quite the interesting journey, and if you want to see me put myself through more misery by playing the worst of the worst, then subscribe for more.